Chapter 741. Chris had been busy looking into Olivia's matters. Finally, he learned of some top-secret news. His assistant came over with a bottle. "Dr. Atkins, Mrs. Miller Sr. sent someone to deliver this. She wants you to test it and figure out what sort of cat food this is." Cat food. Chris glanced at the bottle. A small bottle like that couldn't possibly contain cat food. No cat would have an appetite this small. It might also be supplementary food for cats. They couldn't figure it out, so they wanted you to take a look at it. "Alright, put it at the side. I'll test it later. I have a very important matter to attend to right now." "Understood." Chris left in a hurry. Then, he found Ethan, who looked a little worn out. "Mr. Miller, I have the latest news. Colin's team has always been researching cancer. Some time ago, he had already developed a new anti-cancer medication. In the past 2 years, almost 100 cancer patients have taken the medication. But for now, he had only conducted phase 1 of the clinical trials, and the sample data was far from enough." Ethan asked, "What about the 100 testers? How's their condition?" "In the 2 years, almost 3 years by now, the patients in the first 3 stages have had their conditions stabilized. The cancer data reached normal levels." Ethan felt his heart tightening. "What about the patients in the advanced stage?" "For now, their survival rate is 50%. Half of them are still alive, whereas the other half have passed on. Also, you should know about the 5-year survival rate of cancer patients. The research hasn't even reached its 3rd year, so the data isn't too accurate. For now, one thing is certain. If a patient in the earlier stages takes the medication, it will be highly effective. But as for the patients in the advanced stage," Chris hastily added, "don't be too discouraged, Mr. Miller. At the moment, there's a very small chance of patients in the advanced stage to live for 3 to 5 years. No medicine on the market can ensure that more than 50% of their patients in the advanced stage can live for up to 3 years. This largely indicates that his medicine is very effective. If we can find this medicine, it should be able to prolong Mrs. Miller's life. Also, the side effects of this medicine are far less severe than chemo. Can an insider of Toxic Hive get their hands on it?" Ethan began to have hope. "From what I heard, the original medication was destroyed before they hurriedly relocated last time. The formula is in Colin's hands. As soon as he left, the medicine no longer existed." Ethan thought for a moment. "No, not yet. Look for the testers and get the medicine from them." "Yes, I'm thinking that as well. That's why I've already sent someone to look for the list of the testers. It might need some time. I came here just to tell you the good news. Please don't stimulate Mrs. Miller anymore during this period. We have to think of a way to prolong her life. When we get our hands on that medicine, we can extend her life by a year at least. By then, if Colin can leave Vokemed Mountain, Mrs. Miller may truly have hope of recovery." Ethan suddenly had hope as well. "Tell Brent to send some more men. They have to find the testers as soon as possible." "Understood, Mr. Miller. Please relax and don't overwork yourself." Chris had just left when Janice came over to talk. "Where have you gone, you brat?" "Mom, what happened to Liv? There's something off about her condition. When she looks at a certain thing, she will be reminded of past events. It happens so often that she's living her life in stimulation. This is bad news for her illness." Biting her lip, Janice thought for a moment before speaking. "I think it's because of the M1 injection you gave her. She also has a tumor in her brain, and I'm not sure if it has anything to do with all this. Can you give her the antidote so that she can recover her memories on her own? If not, those flashbacks will tear her apart. Her body is already suffering from chemo, and now, she also has to undergo mental torture. How can she live like this?" Ethan's face turned pale. "Let her recover her memories?" Chapter 742. Now, Olivia hated Ethan even from just a few flashbacks she remembered on occasion. If she recalled everything that had happened, she would hate him to the core. But Janice had a point. Olivia's illness suddenly worsened because of the drugs. If there was a way to stop the drugs, could it also prevent her cancer cells from getting worse? Ethan was reluctant, but for the sake of Olivia's body, he had no other choice. "All right, I'll ask the doctor to reevaluate. I leave Liv in your hands. Ethan managed to find the medical team who had researched M1 back then. After some discussion, they came to the same conclusion Janice did. Chris suggested carefully, Mr. Miller, to be honest, I've been meaning to say this a long time ago. Drugs that can wipe memories will have to break through the human immune system as well as various other barriers. They are also long-lasting drugs. The side effects aren't too severe in normal humans, but they will be amplified if the drugs come into contact with cancer cells. So, the drugs will naturally become an accomplice for the cancer cells. You can't just suppress them, either. You'll have to completely remove the negative effects brought on by M1. If not, with the various drugs taking effect on top of the anti-cancer drugs, things will only get worse. Still, Mr. Miller, from the papers and information you gave us back then, we can only develop drugs like this for the moment. For now, we can't make anything like an antidote. You'll have to get it from Toxic Hive. In the garden, Olivia was basking in the sun with Snowball lazily leaning near her mouth. Ethan stood on the balcony on the second floor, his hands behind his back as he gazed tenderly at Olivia. It was a peaceful scene, but Olivia suddenly clutched at her chest. A look of pain and agony appeared on her face. Sharon hastily came forward to check on her. How are you feeling, Mrs. Miller? Olivia covered her head. It hurts. It hurts a lot. Before she could finish speaking, Olivia vomited again. Unable to hold it in any further, Ethan hurried. Olivia was extremely weak. Like a small rabbit, she curled up into a ball. She looked very pitiful indeed. Ethan got her a glass of warm water. Here, have some water first. Olivia had just drunk the water when she vomited it out the next second. She was also throwing up blood, which splattered on Ethan's body. The doctor. Hurry and call the doctor. For the sake of past friendships, Keith specifically requested to be transferred to the Miller residence. Hence, he could treat Olivia whenever necessary. He arrived within a minute. When he saw the blood on Olivia's bed, he frowned deeply. This wasn't a good sign. Olivia's head and stomach were in excruciating pain. She was already in discomfort. But after chemotherapy, other parts of her body were more or less affected, too. Now, with a headache thrown into the mix, Olivia was in indescribable pain. It hurts. It hurts so much. Don't be afraid, Olivia. I'm here. Keith hastily gave her some painkillers, but Olivia was still suffering. As she endured the horrible pain, she even had thoughts of killing herself. It was simply too much. She was hurting every single second she lived, and even breathing was painful to her. Snowball circled Olivia a few times. Then, as if thinking of something, it returned to its cat bed. All of its toys were brought over. It rummaged through the toys as if it were looking for something. Realizing that its white bottle was gone, Snowball jumped around anxiously. It even kept meowing with urgency. Janice felt anxious as well. Shoo, why are you still meowing at times like this? Chapter 743. That day, Olivia was once again sent to the hospital for a checkup. Keith glanced at the data and various reports from CT scans and NMR tests. The more he read, the deeper his frowns became. The chemo session she underwent 2 years ago was quite effective. But this time, it yielded minimal results. Also, the cancer cells are beginning to take over the tissues around them. Olivia's body can't take chemo sessions anymore. It will only put more burden on her body and hasten her death. His words seemed to have sentenced Olivia to death. Ethan's hand, which was behind his back, gripped a corner of his shirt. Then Keith shook his head. For some reason, her cancer cells are spreading even faster now. If this goes on, Olivia will have another month to live at most. If her condition worsens, she may only have 2 weeks. Ethan felt his vision turning dark. He almost fainted on the spot. She only had 2 weeks to a month left, or maybe even shorter than that. Keith patted Ethan on the shoulder. You've already tried your best. No one wanted things to turn out like this. Keep her company and treasure the last moments you can spend together. Olivia was unconscious, and she refused to eat anything. Hence, she could only rely on nutrient solutions to replenish her energy. Ethan kept watch silently by her side. The corners of his eyes were crimson. She had said a long time ago that she wouldn't be alive for long. Why wasn't he willing to believe her? Why did he force her into this situation? No matter how sad or regretful he was, he couldn't change the ending. The person on the bed lay completely still. Other than the rising and falling of her chest, she looked like she was dead. Ethan was frightened every time he caught sight of her in that condition. She was doing fine some time ago. How did she turn out like this in such a short time? Ethan slapped himself violently across the face. I deserve to die. Hearing the noise, Olivia slowly opened her eyes. Back when she had just woken up, her first impression of Ethan was that he was a man favored by the heavens, noble beyond comparison. But now, when she saw him again, she noticed the unshaven stubble on his chin, and his clothes were wrinkled as well. He stood there with reddened eyes, looking like a helpless child. When Ethan saw Olivia waking up, he hastily walked up to her. How are you feeling, Liv? Am I going to die? Olivia felt much weaker compared to before. Ethan gripped her hand tightly, shaking his head. No, you won't die. She scoffed. You're not a deity. How can you control whether I live or die? Ethan couldn't say anything in return. He simply held Olivia's hand tightly. Back then, he used to say that he would never let Olivia leave unless she died. As if to verify his statement, Olivia's life was coming to an end. Liv, would you like to recover your memories? So, as I suspected, you were the one who messed with my memories. Ethan held her body in an embrace. I'm sorry. I loved you too much. Olivia had lost a lot of weight within a week. As then held her in his arms, he didn't feel much flesh. He felt like he was holding a bag of bones. Let me recover my memories, Ethan. I don't want to leave this world in ignorance. It doesn't matter whether you love or hate me. You don't have the right to control me. Ethan fell silent for a moment. All right. The sky was turning dark. In a garden filled with thorns and roses, Helen was wearing a green cocktail dress as she held a fan in her hand. She fanned herself from time to time. A woman's voice rang out. You look quite relaxed. I feel like it's always spring here. No one will be able to find this place of yours. Helen turned around. A woman wearing a cape stood under the moonlight. The cape fell away. To reveal her identity, she was none other than Janice. Under close examination, the two had slightly similar features. Long time no see, cousin. Chapter 744. Janice and Helen were cousins in the first place, and they were pretty similar in their devotion to love. Looks like you've finally cured your blindness. You no longer treat a common stone like treasure. Holding the fan in her hand, Helen fanned herself from time to time. Every movement of hers was charming. This was their first time meeting each other in a long while. Even so, the first thing they said to each other was a direct hit to the other's weak points. Janice didn't back down, either. It's nothing compared to your long-lasting love. You've been divorced for so many years, but you still spent so much effort to do all this. But in the end, you never did win over that Carlton guy, did you? Helen replied, I didn't win his heart, but at least I've gotten my revenge by destroying their family. I'm not as soft-hearted as you are, Janice. You gave your husband to another woman, and you even gave them money to help them make a comeback. Janice, you're so kind that even Mother Teresa pales in comparison. Helen came from a difficult background. When she was young, everyone looked down on her because she was an illegitimate child. Only Janice, a proper daughter from a rich family, would talk to her. The two had a love-hate relationship with each other since they were young. Unlike in the past, Janice didn't continue the argument today. Instead, she took a seat and poured a cup of tea for herself. We're more or less in the same situation. Let's not be hypocrites. Janice sighed. As that child. All right. I thought you only had eyes for that jerk named Kenneth, and you've already forgotten that you had a daughter. I wasn't of sound mind years ago, and I hurt those children. I was the reason they couldn't have a proper family, and they had to be separated from their loved ones for so many years. Thank you for taking care of Leia all these years. Helen lit a cigarette, saying lazily, Janice, Leia no longer exists in this world. Only Begonia remains. T want to see her. I apologize for being so blunt, but she may not want to see you. The things you did when she was young had turned into a nightmare in her heart. Even now, she would be startled awake in the middle of the night because of those nightmares. Your existence itself is hurting her, so you shouldn't meet her. From a long distance away, Leia kept watch. She felt restless ever since she heard that Janice would be coming. She hadn't seen her mother in years. Her impression of Janice was stuck in her childhood when Janice strangled her and shouted in agony for her to die. But the beautiful woman standing under the moonlight tonight was noble, elegant, and wise. She was like a completely different person from the mother in her memories. When Leia heard Janice asking about her, she still felt a little emotional. Like Ethan, she had Janice's blood flowing in her veins in the closest way possible. No matter how scared she was, she didn't hate Janice. Leia panicked when she heard that Janice wanted to see her. Her fingers subconsciously touched her face. Her face had been burned beyond recognition in a huge fire. In the past few years, she had to undergo countless operations to keep her face intact. Janice probably wouldn't recognize her. Even so, Leia was like a small child waiting at the kindergarten gate on a rainy day, hoping that her mother would come and pick her up as soon as possible. Having her request declined, Janice thought about how the pain she had inflicted on Leia had continued to this day. She thought that Leia must have hated her to the core. So, of course, Leia wouldn't want to see her. She had an even more important reason for coming here. She would still need some more time to mend the relationship between her and Leia. But Olivia couldn't wait any longer. Just when Leia thought that her mother would keep asking to see her, Janice spoke up. I'll get straight to the point, Helen. I came here for a more important matter. I need the antidote to M1. Chapter 745. Helen was curious. Oh, why would you want that out of the blue? It's embarrassing, but that love-struck and stubborn son of mine used it on his wife. In the end, we found that the drug would stimulate the growth of cancer cells. Now, my daughter-in-law is dying. You've been researching this drug for years. Since we're cousins and all, please help me just this once. When Leia heard that, the fear and anxiety disappeared from her face, and an even colder expression took its place. So Janice didn't come here for her at all. It was Olivia again. Ethan loved Olivia. And now, Olivia was even trying to snatch Janice's love from her. Leia didn't even notice that a thorn had pierced her finger. What was she still fantasizing about? Her mother never loved her in the past, and it wouldn't change now. She was an unwanted child. Leia turned around to leave as a trail of blood dripped down her finger. Helen fiddled with the fan in her hand. This drug was developed within our organization. I'd like to know how your son managed to get his hands on it. Helen, a human life is at stake here. Don't bother about how he got it. By the looks of it, he's the one sneaking around that night. Sadly, the version he took was the one with side effects. I guess his plan backfired. Janice was about to lose her temper. Can't you be a little nicer when you talk? Why haven't you changed even a bit? No wonder that Carlton guy didn't like you. Do you think you're any better? Kenneth also called you a mad woman, didn't he? Fine, let's stop arguing. We're not young anymore. If we argue, we'll just be a disgrace to ourselves. Just tell me if you have the antidote with you. Helen glanced at her. Even if I do, I can't give it to you. Someone has already paid for Olivia to die. Who is it? Do you think I'd tell you? No wonder my son told me to investigate you. You were the one who made it so Marina and Liv were switched back then, weren't you? Janice, we're no strangers to each other, so allow me to give you some advice. You'd better not get yourself involved in Olivia's mess. Even if I gave you the antidote, she may not be able to live. It would be best if she could die like this. With a dark look on her face, Janice said coldly, I can't interfere in someone else's matters. But now that there's a way to save her, I have to try. Helen, please at least do it for my sake. Helen sighed. In all these years, I've never seen you begging like this. Fine, you owe me one. But I can't help further than that. I understand. Also, here's another tip for you. This antidote can only get rid of M1's side effects. It's not anti-cancer medication. If she dies because of cancer, Don't blame it on me. Thanks, Helen. Janice knew that it was already quite difficult for Helen to give her the antidote. After getting the antidote, Janice handed it to Brent right away, telling him to pass it to Olivia. What's the matter? Why aren't you leaving? Smiling, Helen asked, do you want to reminisce with me? With an earnest look on her face, Janice said, Helen, please let me see that child. Even if she hates me, I still want to see her. Fine, but she hates you so much. It's not up to me whether she wants to see you or not. I'll just look at her from a distance. Helen slowly got up. Come with me, then. One after the other, the two arrived at the lab in the underground base. Helen stopped in front of a floor-to-ceiling window. It was a one-way mirror. They could peer in, but the people inside wouldn't be able to see what was going on outside. It was useful for checking on everyone's progress and condition whenever they wanted. Helen pointed. There, that's your daughter. Don't ask me why she doesn't look like you. Her face was burned in a fire, so she got her current face from plastic surgery. A pained look appeared on Janice's face. My daughter. Chapter 746. Janice gazed at Leia's face. Even though she couldn't make out the burn marks on Leia's face, she heard that Leia had undergone dozens of skin transplant surgeries to get to her current look. Janice's heart ached terribly. If she hadn't had mental problems back then, she wouldn't have harmed her biological daughter. You should leave. She's doing very well right now, and she loves researching and developing drugs. But your existence is harmful to her. Janice stared at her. I'm just looking. As if sensing something, Leia walked over to the two. But she could only see the sheer white of the glass. She smiled self-mockingly. Janice never loved her at all. How could Janice be here to see her? Meanwhile, in the Miller residence, Brent handed the antidote to Ethan right away. This is the antidote, Mr. Miller. When Mrs. Miller takes it, she will be able to recover all her memories. All right. With his hands behind his back, he stood before the large floor-to-ceiling windows, mumbling. It must be done soon, yes. That's right. With the antidote in his hands, Ethan slowly walked out. It was time to end everything. He knew that as soon as he gave Olivia the antidote, it wouldn't matter if Olivia could survive or not. They would never be together again for the rest of their lives. Because of all those things he had done to Olivia in the past, she hated him to the core. As the first rays of dawn shone into the room, Olivia slowly opened her eyes. Sharon's gentle voice rang out. Mrs. Miller, the weather is great today. Would you like to go outside and get some sun? All right. Olivia glanced at the sunlight outside, which blinded her eyes a little. She probably wouldn't have many days left to see sunlight like this. Her body was weak and helpless, so she could only sit in the wheelchair as Sharon brought her to the dining room. In the kitchen, she saw a man in a white shirt waving a spatula around. Olivia guessed that the food she ate in the past few days, which tasted familiar, must be Ethan's cooking. Soon, various delicious breakfast foods and snacks were laid out before her. She didn't have an appetite at all. You don't have to put in this much effort. I don't have the appetite, anyway. Ethan looked at her with a gentle gaze. Still, you have to eat something. Fine, I'll treat it as my last breakfast. Picking up a spoon, she drank the fragrant soup. The tastes of the separate ingredients blended very well. His cooking was great. Did you cook often in the past? Perhaps because she was going to die, Olivia spoke in a calm voice. Ethan shook his head. I rarely cook in recent years. When we were just married back then, you'd pester me to make soup and other foods as long as I'm home. As time went on, I got better. Judging from his words, he seemed to be saying that he was very nice to her in the past. So, how did they end up like this in the end? As soon as Olivia closed her eyes, she could picture Ethan standing next to Marina. They looked like a happy family. The tenderness she felt in her chest was completely gone, leaving only coldness. Olivia didn't even want to ask any questions about them. She lowered her head and continued drinking the soup. Ethan passed to her a glass of soy milk. Olivia was about to take it when Ethan held her hand. Liv, Olivia looked at him, puzzled. She had no idea what he was trying to do. What's the matter? Ethan wanted to say something but decided against it. Nothing. Drink it while it's hot. Olivia felt that Ethan was behaving very oddly today. He looked like he had something to say, but he had to suppress it and stay silent. She didn't eat much during the meal. She was in low spirits, so she went back to her room and lay down to rest. The sunlight was just nice at that moment. Snowball lay curled up under the window ledge, napping. Gazing at the flowers blooming outside, Olivia felt sleepy. She slowly closed her eyes. She had a very long dream. In the dream, she saw some familiar faces. Like old friends, they gathered around her and chatted with her. Olivia slept for a long time. Ethan stayed by her side all the time, quietly waiting for judgment when she woke up. For him, those 24 hours seemed to drag out forever. When it was almost daybreak, Olivia woke up from her dreams. She panted heavily, feeling as if someone was strangling her in her dreams. She felt extremely uncomfortable. Her memories were stuck in the image of when Ethan forcefully injected drugs into her. When she suddenly opened her eyes, she met the same gaze she had seen in her dreams. In the past, there was a cold determination in his eyes. But now, he was looking at her carefully. His throat was a little dry because he had stayed up all night. Live. Chapter 747. Gentle sunlight shone in through the window. Ethan had his back to the light, and the sunlight coated him with a gentle golden glow. His firm features appeared much gentler as well. He sat there quietly, and tiny dust particles danced around him. At that moment, it seemed like they had gone back in time to when they first met each other. In just a few years, they could no longer return to who they once were. Long silence replaced their rare greetings. Ethan wasn't confident at all. Did you remember everything? Yes, Olivia's expression had changed. It was resolute and cold. She spoke up straight away. Ethan, if you still have the tiniest shred of conscience left, let me go. A bitter and exasperated smile appeared on Ethan's lips. As expected, after she regained her memories, the first thing she wanted was to get away from him. Liv, I know that you hate me. But your body is not in a good condition right now. It's not that I don't want to let you go, but I simply can't. I promise, when you've gotten better, I'll let you go. But for now, you have to cooperate and get treatment. Olivia sneered. If I can truly get better, will you let me go? Her questioning was startling. It was as if Ethan knew her very well, and she also had a thorough understanding of Ethan's character. If she weren't this close to death, he wouldn't have recovered her memories. Even if there truly came a day when she got better, it would be even less likely for him to let her go. Yes. Ethan leaned in, gazing into her eyes as he said slowly, as long as you stay alive, I can let you go. He then changed his tone. But not now. Your body is very weak, and you have to rest and recuperate in the Miller residence. You must be hungry. I'll ask Sharon too. Olivia interrupted him without hesitation. Ethan, I don't ask for anything else. Just let me go. Ethan paused for a moment in his footsteps. But then, he hastened his pace. He had gently closed the door. Olivia lay quietly on the bed, all alone. The huge Miller residence was like a cage that bound her here. She didn't deny the fact that Ethan loved her a lot, but his love was like chains tightly binding her. She couldn't run away nor breathe in those chains. Even though she had recovered her memories, she didn't feel any better. Olivia felt like a flower slowly wilting. Perhaps fearing that he might upset her, Ethan disappeared again. Sharon came in with some food. How are you feeling, Mrs. Miller? I want to see Dr. Rogers. All right, I'll call him over right away. Keith hurried over. Are you feeling uncomfortable again? Olivia looked at him quietly. Long time no see, Keith. The look in her eyes had changed. Keith instantly realized what was going on. Do you remember everything now, Olivia? Yes. Keith, how much longer do I have to live? To prevent her from overthinking, Ethan didn't tell her the truth. Olivia herself felt that her days were numbered. Don't think about those things, Olivia. Just give it to me straight, Keith. I'm prepared. 2 weeks to a month at most. Keith sighed. The chemo session this time wasn't very effective. The cancer cells in your body are very active, and there were even signs of them spreading and diffusing. 2 weeks, you say? A cold look flashes across Olivia's eyes. But she didn't want to die. She still hadn't figured out the identity of the culprit who had killed her children. How could she die now? Don't feel burdened, Olivia. You have to depend on your immune system to deal with cancer. 2 years ago, you've also survived it on your own, right? You should believe in yourself. Thank you, Keith. Olivia thought about the medicine Colin once gave her. She wondered if it was still on that island. Even though there was a very slim chance of her surviving, she had to cling to that hope. Chapter 748. Sharon was elated when she heard Olivia taking the initiative to ask for food. In the past week, Olivia didn't have much of an appetite. So, this was a good sign. Unbeknownst to her, Olivia still didn't feel like eating right now. But Olivia could only try her best so that she could survive. Sharon felt comforted when she watched Olivia taking huge bites of the food. Yes, it's a good thing to eat more. You'll strengthen your immune system. Olivia ate too quickly, so, after feeling nauseous for a bit, she threw up. When Sharon saw how much Olivia was suffering, she felt heartbroken as well. Why don't you take it easy for now, Mrs. Miller? After drinking some water, Olivia calmed down. Then, she began to eat again. Many cancer patients in the advanced stage couldn't eat much. The less they ate, the weaker their immune system became and the more active their cancer cells would. After eating, Olivia threw up again. When she was done, she continued eating. She only had one thing on her mind. She had to stay alive. The thing Ethan feared the most was that Olivia would get discouraged and give up on living after she regained her memories. After Olivia listened to Sharon's words, she began to have hope again. She refused to give in to death, and that was the best thing she could do. All right, if anything happens to her, tell me right away. Don't worry, Mr. Miller. Olivia's voice sounded cold from the other side of the door. If there's anything you want to talk about, just talk to me. Ethan looked at the entrance. In her wheelchair, Olivia looked coldly at him. Sharon had no choice but to leave. Ethan couldn't figure out what Olivia was thinking. So, he took the initiative to step forward and take her inside. I'm very happy that you came to see me, Liv. I'm here for my old phone. There was a trace of bitterness in Ethan's smile. Sure, there's also a bottle. You saw it on the island before, and I told you that it contained vitamins. Can you get someone to send it over? What's inside the bottle? Now that things had turned out like this, Olivia decided not to hide it from him anymore. She said slowly, I should have died 2 years ago. Do you know how I survived? It's all thanks to the anti-cancer medication Colin gave me. Olivia's words were like a fierce slap to Ethan's face. Everyone else knew that Olivia had an incurable disease, but he was the only one who had no idea. He even did everything in his power to hurt her when she was at her weakest. Ethan was about to inform Chris about it when he received a call from the latter. Good news, Mr. Miller. I've tested the cat food. I mean, the medicine in the bottle you sent over. All its components have anti-cancer properties. Hurry and give it to Mrs. Miller. I already know that. Chris sent the medicine over right away. Olivia took the medicine without hesitation. In the days that followed, she didn't have time to go against Ethan. She knew her current condition, and she also knew that the most the medicine could owe was to prolong her life for some time. She couldn't be cured. If she wanted to survive, she couldn't count on anyone else. She could only save herself. She contacted Avery right away, but the call never went through. If it were before, Olivia would simply give up. But now, to stay alive, she couldn't care less about those things. She found the number she got from Troy back then. The call went through, and Troy's assistant was the one who picked up. When Olivia spoke her name, the call was quickly forwarded to Troy himself. Were you looking for me, Miss Fordham? His voice sounded a little tired, but fortunately, she managed to contact him. Mr. Troy, I have something important to talk to Mr. Avery about, but I can't get a hold of him. Can you please contact him for me? Avery's body isn't in the best condition right now. If there's something you want to talk about, you can tell me. With the kindness you've shown our family, We will do our best to repay it. Do you know about Peace's embrace, Mr. Troy? Chapter 749. Back then, Avery was wearing a mask throughout the process. He was the boss behind the scenes of Peace's embrace, so only a few people would know about his identity. Perhaps even his family was in the dark. So, Olivia could only gather information discreetly. As expected, Troy scratched his head in confusion. Peace's embrace. What's that? Nothing. I was just asking. Is Mr. Avery in a very bad condition? She recalled the man's haggard face from 2 years ago. It had been 2 years since then, so he must have found a suitable kidney by now, right? With the position and status of the Fordhams, no matter what methods he used, it wouldn't be much trouble for him to get a matching kidney. Troy's voice was low. Well, it's a little complicated. Miss Fordham, if you have any requests, feel free to ask. Olivia asked some questions. They weren't quite familiar with each other, after all. So, without revealing Avery's current situation, Troy ended the call. If Olivia couldn't get help from Peace's embrace, the only option she had left was to look for Colin. Olivia looked at the profile picture of his account, which had been inactive for a long while. She took the initiative and made the first move. In the past, Colin would reply to her messages instantly. But now, she felt like she was talking into the void. She had lost contact with him. His number was also deactivated a long time ago. Olivia gripped her phone as she zoned out. Was fate truly leading her to her death by blocking off all her options? Before she realized it, Ethan had already appeared behind her. He informed her of the current situation. We don't know if Avery is dead or alive at this point. Colin has entered Vokmed Mountain, and we can't locate him. Olivia's expression grew dark. She smiled in exasperation. Maybe this is fate. I'm not even given a way out. Ethan's heart ached for her. Liv, I've already sent more men to look for Colin. I'm sure they will bring him back in one piece. Olivia questioned him. What if I can't hold out until that day? Ethan fell silent. He didn't say anything. He didn't dare to think about that outcome, let alone mention it. Humans will die eventually, and I'm no exception. Ethan, we'll part ways in the end. Olivia looked at him calmly. My heart no longer belongs to you. Ethan pursed his lips tightly. His hands fell limp on either side of his body. He looked like a child who had done something wrong. I know. Watching his behavior, Olivia chose not to say the words she was about to speak. I'm tired. I'll send you back to rest. All right. In the next 2 weeks, Olivia ate and slept well. In just a week, her complexion looked a little better, and her stomach ached less frequently. Without the effects of the drugs, the cancer cells in her body were getting under control. It was a good start. After all, she had already experienced it before. Like a seed in the ground, Olivia waited for the day when she would push her shoots out of the ground. After preserving enough energy, Olivia slowly moved her body. When the side effects of chemotherapy had passed, she could already get off the bed and move about as she wished. Even though her body was still weak compared to before, it was much better than it had been during her episodes. She didn't reveal her recovery to the others. When Sharon and Janice came over to visit, she pretended that she was still weak and sickly. She was building the foundation of her escape from the cage. Keith had been taking good care of her these days. He was sincerely happy for her when he saw her. He took out a blood pressure monitor. Olivia, let me measure your blood pressure for a moment. All right. Olivia looked at Sharon, who was standing at the side. Sharon, tell the kitchen staff that I'd like to have some duck soup. Sharon was elated to hear Olivia making requests of her own accord. All right. I'll have them prepare it right away. After Sharon left, Olivia's expression turned serious. Lowering her voice, Olivia said, Please help me, Keith. Chapter 750. Go ahead. I'll help as long as it's something I can do. Olivia spoke a few words in his ear. Keith looked a little worried. Are you sure you want to do that? Keith, I want to leave this place no matter if I'm dead or alive. All right, I'll try my best. When Ethan received her blood test report, he was a little puzzled. Her red and white blood cells have increased a little, and all her health indicators are improving as well. Why can't she get out of bed yet? Chris shook his head as well. That can't be. Logically speaking, Mrs. Miller should be able to walk around now. Keith had a cold look on his face. Do you know how strong the drugs used in chemotherapy are? Other than her cancer cells, her normal cells were destroyed as well. Just one session was enough to impair her health. Her knees were weak, and her limbs were cold, too. It has only been around 20 days since then. So, it's normal that she can't get out of bed. You can't recover from damage like that within months. It'll take at least a year or two. Some patients were even haunted by the side effects of chemo for 7 or 8 years. After all, Chris didn't specialize in oncology, so he wasn't as knowledgeable as Keith was. Yes, it's already great news that Mrs. Miller is improving. You can't expect her to recover as quickly as if she caught the flu. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes. I was too anxious. Yes, Mr. Miller. It's already wonderful news that Mrs. Miller's condition has stabilized. She has to rest and recuperate slowly. You can't rush it too much. Even though Olivia isn't in the best condition, any sign of recovery is a good thing. I'll constantly keep watch on her health indicators. Still, Mr. Miller, the same old rule applies. Don't provoke Olivia, and make sure she maintains a stable and good mood. Ethan replied, got it. To make sure that Olivia could rest and recover in peace, Ethan avoided meeting her. He even grounded Marina in the backyard. To prevent her from causing trouble, he felt that it was safest to keep her nearby and have people keep an eye on her. He provided the best environment for Olivia to recuperate. He would also constantly pray for her recovery. Unbeknownst to him, Olivia would discreetly get out of bed and exercise her body every night. She practiced climbing in the yard. Keith had already sent her the blueprint of the Miller residence. She was on the first floor, but a large garden lay beyond the walls. There were also surveillance cameras everywhere. There was a very small chance of her escaping. As soon as Ethan noticed that she was running away, he would only strengthen the security. He wouldn't give her another chance again. So, Olivia could only abandon her plans of running away from the Miller residence. She only had one way of escaping. She would have to leave the Miller residence first. Keith, I have a plan, but it'll need a fuse. I need you to play along with me when the time comes. All right. Olivia had already heard that Marina was living in this villa as well. Marina presented the perfect opportunity. But someone was keeping watch over the yard Marina was in. Olivia's legs weren't doing well, and it was quite hard for her to walk out there. It was quite a challenging task to lure Marina. One afternoon, Olivia asked Sharon to show her around. Sharon, I've never gone down this path before. Can you bring me there so that I can have a look? That path led to none other than Marina's yard. Sharon's expression shifted a little. It's getting late. The doctor suggested that you eat small and frequent meals. Let's go back and get you something to eat. Sharon, I'm not hungry. That looks like a nice place, so let's go. I feel like I'm rotting from lying in the room every day. There's only a yard in that direction, and you won't find anything interesting there. I'll bring you to the front yard. Olivia looked coldly at her. Why won't you let me go there? Could it be that Ethan is hiding someone in the yard? What are you thinking, Mrs. Miller? That's impossible. Bring me there, then. Sharon didn't know why Olivia insisted on going to that yard. Wasn't she just looking for trouble?